everybody. We've reached the middle of another week and hope it's going well for you. In our Bible reading plan here at First Baptist, we are currently in the book of Galatians, and today we are in chapter 4. So I hope you've already read the chapter and written in your journal what the Lord said to you. Similar to what I said yesterday, today I want to speak about something theological and then something devotional, because both of those jumped out at me in this chapter as well as tomorrow's chapter. Theologically, Paul uses in this chapter what we call an allegory. Now, there's a difference between an allegory and a parable, and knowing those differences is important. A parable is a story intended to make a point, maybe a couple of points. In a parable, all the characters don't necessarily represent someone. He's just making a point, okay? In an allegory, every character in the story means something. So there's a little more detail to it typically in terms of interpretation. And so in this chapter, in verses 24 through 26, and then verses 28 and 31, we won't take time to read it because you can do that on your own. He takes the story of Abraham and his descendants and he turns it into an allegory. He's not teaching history, even though these are historical events. He's using these historical events in an allegorical sense. So you have Abraham with his two sons. The son Ishmael, who was born to the handmaid Hagar. Thus Hagar and Ishmael were both slaves. You have his son Isaac, who was born to Sarah, his wife. Sarah and Isaac were both free. And he says Hagar and her son Ishmael, who were slaves, allegorically would be like the Jews of his day, Paul's day, in Jerusalem, who were trying to find salvation by obeying the law God gave Moses at Sinai. And he said what they're doing is making themselves slaves to the law, slaves to perfection, because as we saw yesterday, if anyone's going to be saved by keeping the law, they have to be perfect. However, those who are seeking salvation and seeking to live the Christian life through faith are like Sarah and Abraham's son through her, Isaac, who are free. They're not slaves. They are free. So salvation through faith makes us free, but seeking salvation through keeping the law, through good works, through doing things, through legalism, actually makes you a slave. So when you read these verses, that'll make a little bit of sense to you. He said, those who are saved by faith and are free, they are the people who belong to the new Jerusalem, the Jerusalem above, the Jerusalem in heaven. Okay, true salvation. Those on earth trying to be saved by works, they're like the Jews of the earthly Jerusalem trying to be saved by keeping the law. And that one does not work. So the point is that we are not saved by the law and we do not live as Christians by the law. We are saved by faith and we live by faith. We live in the power of the Spirit. The same Spirit that saves us empowers us to live the Christian life. And through love and freedom and faith and the power of the Spirit, we live a godly life. That's the theological point. Now the devotional thought for today is found in verse 9. So if you've got your Bible, look at that with me, please. Excuse me. He says, but now that you have come to know God, so you're saved and you're in a relationship, you've come to know God, or rather, it's like he's correcting himself, or maybe explaining a little more detail. Now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how is it that you turn back again to the weak and worthless elemental things to which you desire to be enslaved all over again? He said, now that you're saved, why in the world are you trying to turn back to the old way and become a slave of the old way, a slave of the law? It doesn't make any sense. Jesus set you free. Why do you want to be a slave again? But devotionally, the part that really hit me was the first part, where he says, but now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God. You see, salvation and living as a follower of Christ, the Christian life, it's a relationship. We have come to know God. We know Him. We don't just know about Him. We just don't have information in our head, intellectual ideas and truth and so on about God. We know Him. Just like we know people. When you know someone, what does that mean? Well, you know them. You're in a relationship with them. And you know God. It's equally true that God knows you. That, yes, I'm in a relationship with God. You're in a relationship with God. But guess what? He is in a relationship with you. And He is in a relationship with me. I know Him. He knows me. You know Him. He knows you. It's about a relationship. And relationships are about love, about doing for one another, being with one another. It's not about slavery and a sense of obligation and duty. We do it out of love. It's a whole different approach to life. One last thing. We know God because He chose to make a relationship with Him possible. He chose to say, He said, I want to know you, and I want you to know me. I want to be in a relationship with you. I want you to be in a relationship with me. Apart from God making that decision, we can never know God. And that's the grace of God. So don't you become a slave to legalism, and don't you let anybody out there in the Christian world, the religious world, try to browbeat you into legalism. In the freedom of Jesus and the grace of Jesus and the love of Jesus Christ, you live a godly life because you love Him. God bless you. I'll see you.